My family gambled my $2,000 and my event planning skills on a Hawaiian fantasy, betting I was too desperate for their love to fight back when they cut me out of the picture. They were wrong. By making me the architect of their dream vacation, they handed me the blueprints, the master keys, and the self-destruct button. And as they stood stranded in the middle of the airport with nothing but their designer luggage and the sheer audacity of their betrayal, I was back home about to press it. It all began, as these things always did, with a beautiful poisonous lie about belonging. From the day my father married Susan, I became a ghost in my own family, a living relic of his first marriage that they kept in the attic of their lives. My existence was an inconvenient truth in the perfect story they were trying to write, a story that always starred Susan's daughter Jessica. It was never a single cinematic moment of rejection. It was a slow, quiet erosion of my place in their world. It was the family Christmas card where I was tacked onto the end of the line, half my body cropped out of the frame. It was the way Susan would erupt with applause when Jessica made the cheerleading squad, but greet the news of my academic scholarship with a flat, hollow, "Oh, that's nice, dear." I was a constant breathing reminder of a past my father was desperate to forget. So when he called me with his grand idea, I was already starved for affection and primed for the trap. He painted a glorious picture of 2 weeks at a luxury resort on the sun-drenched shores of Maui, a chance to finally, truly become one unit. "This is for all of us," he said, his voice dripping with a sincerity I craved like water in a desert. "You, me, Susan, and Jessica, to become the family we were always meant to be." That single phrase, "the family we were meant to be," was the perfect bait, and I swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. I wanted to be chosen. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be more than just a monthly check he was legally obligated to write. And then, right on schedule, came the pivot to finances. My father and Susan sighed about how tight money was, how a trip of this scale was stretching them to their absolute limit. It was my cue, the moment I was supposed to step up and perform my role as the grateful outsider, eager to buy her way in. Desperate to prove my worth, I walked right into it. I offered to help pay. The next 3 months of my life became a blur of relentless work. My entire world shrank to the 4 walls of the high-end steakhouse where I was a server. I took every extra shift they offered me, working back-to-back doubles, giving up my weekends and covering holidays for other staff. My social life evaporated, replaced by long hours on my aching feet, the smell of seared steak and garlic butter permanently clinging to my hair. I packed my own sad lunches, brewed my own coffee at home, and watched my bank account with the laser focus of an eagle. Every dollar I saved was another stone in the bridge I was trying to build back to a family that had never wanted me in the first place. When I finally transferred $2,000 into my father's account, it felt like more than just money. It felt like an application, my official bid for a permanent seat at their table. Because I was the one who was supposedly good with technology, and more importantly, because I had put up a significant chunk of the cash, the entire logistical burden of the trip landed on my shoulders. I embraced the task with the zeal of a convert. I poured dozens of hours into the project, poring over reviews and comparing resort amenities. I finally chose and booked a magnificent 2-bedroom villa with a sprawling private balcony overlooking the Pacific Ocean. I reserved a premium full-size SUV, knowing Jessica would complain if she didn't have enough room for all her luggage. I even managed to snag 4 highly coveted, non-refundable tickets for a sunrise tour at the Haleakala volcano, a truly once-in-a-lifetime experience that sold out months in advance. Every confirmation email that arrived was a small thrill. The resort, the rental car, the volcano tour, all of it was under my name, with the substantial deposit secured on my credit card. Seeing my name, Clara, on those official documents felt like a contract. It felt like a binding promise that this time I was an essential part of the story, not just a character to be written out. The final weeks before our departure were thick with a strange, dissonant energy. I bought a new bathing suit, imagining myself on that Hawaiian beach, the warm sand and gentle surf finally washing away the years of feeling like an afterthought. Jessica talked endlessly about the outfits she was packing and the perfect spots for her Instagram photos. Whenever I brought up how excited I was for the sunrise tour, she would just give me a strange, unreadable smile. Susan would chatter about shopping trips to the fancy boutiques in Wiley for the girls, before adding, as a clumsy aside, "You can come along too, of course, if you want." The warning signs were everywhere, like bright red flags planted in the sand, but I was so blinded by the glare of my own desperate hope that I chose not to see them. My carefully built fantasy world came crashing down just 4 days before we were scheduled to fly. I called the house, my voice practically vibrating with excitement, to finalize our plans for getting to the airport. My father picked up, his voice sounding distant and distracted. "Hey, just calling to check in," I chirped. "4 more days! I can almost feel that Maui sunshine already." He made a strange non-committal sound, a vocal shrug. "Yeah, listen, Clara, about the trip," he said, his tone so nonchalant it felt like a slap in the face. "There's been a slight change of plans." My stomach plunged. "A change? What's wrong? Is it the flight? Is everything okay?" There was a short pause on his end, and then he let out a soft, condescending little laugh. No, nothing like that. It's just, well, Susan and I have been talking it over, and we think it would be for the best if you didn't come with us on this one." The silence that followed was so absolute I could hear the hum of my own refrigerator. The words didn't make sense. They just hung in the air, nonsensical and cruel. "What are you talking about? I helped pay for it. I planned the whole thing." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," he sighed, his tone shifting to one of weary patience, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum over a broken toy. "Honestly, it was just simpler to let you think you were coming along. It avoided a lot of unnecessary awkwardness and arguments." Simpler. My sacrifice, my money, my hope, it was all just a matter of convenience for them, the path of least resistance to get what they wanted. "You used my money," I whispered, a cold, hard knot of rage beginning to form in my chest, pushing out all the shock and hurt. "You had me book a villa for 4 people. You told me this was a family trip." "It is a family trip," he said, his voice now taking on a note of defensive firmness, as if he were the one being attacked. "It's a trip for our family. Susan feels, and I have to agree with her, that Jessica really needs some uninterrupted quality time with just her parents right now. You have a tendency to make things complicated. We're just looking for a more relaxed, positive vibe. I'm sure if you're being honest with yourself, you can understand that. Our family, the 3 of them, the fury that had been simmering just below the surface for a decade, finally quietly boiled over. But it wasn't a hot, screaming rage. It was an ice-cold, diamond-hard clarity. They hadn't just excluded me. They had conspired against me from the very beginning. They had taken my money, exploited my labor, and were now discarding me like a used napkin. The complete and utter lack of remorse in my father's voice was the final, clarifying insult. He thought he had already won. He expected me to cry. He expected me to plead. He expected me to retreat into my quiet apartment and mourn the loss of a family that was never truly mine. But he had made one critical, glorious mistake. He had forgotten one very important detail: my name, my credit card, my control. I took a slow, deep breath, carefully smoothing every trace of emotion from my voice. "Okay," I said, my tone suddenly calm and serene. "I understand completely. I hope the 3 of you have an absolutely wonderful time." "We will," he said, audibly relieved to have the unpleasantness behind him. He hung up the phone. I stood there for a long moment in the silence of my apartment, the phone still pressed to my ear. I walked out of my apartment a few minutes later, not as a victim, but as a general on the brink of a brilliant military campaign. The drive to my favorite wine shop was a blur. The deep throbbing wound in my chest was still there, but it was being rapidly overshadowed by a powerful, exhilarating sense of purpose. If I wasn't going on this vacation, then neither was my money, and if my $2,000 weren't going, then nobody was. That evening, from the comfort of my own living room, with a generous glass of Pinot Noir acting as my trusted advisor, I launched my counteroffensive. I systematically and joyfully dismantled their dream vacation, one satisfying click at a time. First on the agenda was the gorgeous oceanfront villa at the resort in Kaanapali. I logged into the booking portal and took one last look at the professional photos. The sweeping views of the Pacific, the plush king-sized beds, the private balcony where they had imagined themselves sipping their morning coffee. I let my mouse hover over the cancel reservation button, savoring the moment of pure unadulterated power. Then I clicked it. A confirmation email appeared in my inbox instantly. Their castle in the sand had just been washed away by the tide. Next up was the rental car, the brand new full-size SUV that was waiting for them at Kahului Airport. I could have just cancelled it online, but that felt too easy, too impersonal. Instead, I called the National Customer Service Hotline. Using my most concerned and slightly panicked voice, I explained that I had just been alerted to a suspicious reservation made in Hawaii under my name. I told the representative I was deeply worried that a family member might have used my information without my permission and that I needed to cancel it immediately to be safe. For good measure, I asked them to place a fraud alert on my account, flagging any future attempts to rent a vehicle under my name. The agent was incredibly sympathetic and assured me she would add a permanent security note to my file. That, I thought, would be a delightful little surprise when my father confidently presented his driver's license at the rental counter. Then there were the Volcano Sunrise tour tickets. The tour website had stated in large bold letters, absolutely no refunds or cancellations. I took that as a personal challenge. I called the tour company's local office directly. I spun a heartbreaking and elaborate story about a sudden grave family medical emergency that required my immediate presence at home. The manager I spoke to was a wellspring of compassion. Touched by my fictional tale of woe, he graciously agreed to make a one-time exception to their policy and issue a full refund back to my credit card. Finally, there were the airline tickets. The 3 of them were still on the itinerary, which had been booked using my credit card. Canceling their seats directly would have incurred massive fees for me, but canceling just my own seat, that was simple. I logged into the airline's website and, with a few precise clicks, I removed myself from the booking. I received a full travel credit for a future flight of my own. I knew from past travel experience that altering a multi-person reservation like that often triggers an internal alert, flagging the entire itinerary for a manual review by a gate agent. It can lead to all sorts of airport chaos, from seat reassignments to boarding delays. It was the perfect petty little cherry on top of my revenge sundae. I slept better that night than I had in a decade. It was the deep, dreamless sleep of justice finally served. The next morning, I silenced my phone and went out for a long celebratory brunch with a friend. When I finally switched the ringer back on around noon, my phone immediately erupted in a beautiful symphony of their panic. 37 missed calls from my father, 21 from Susan. The text messages were a literary masterpiece of escalating hysteria. It began with simple, confused questions. Dad, at the Maui airport, the resort is saying our reservation doesn't exist. Can you forward me the confirmation? Dad, what is happening? The car rental place says the booking was cancelled due to suspected fraud. Call me right now. Then it progressed to a dawning, horrified comprehension. Dad, did you do this? Was this you? This isn't funny, Clara. Answer your phone. Susan, I cannot begin to describe the depth of your cruelty. Jessica is in tears. You have deliberately and maliciously ruined this for her. You need to fix this. You need to fix this now. And finally, it reached the glorious thundering crescendo of pure, impotent rage. Dad, you have destroyed everything, you selfish, spiteful little brat. We are trapped at the airport with a mountain of luggage and nowhere to go. You will answer this phone. I set the phone down on the table and allowed myself a slow, satisfied smile. There was nothing for me to fix. He was the one who broke our family. I just canceled the reservations. A few hours later, a furious rapid-fire banging rattled my apartment door. I peered through the peephole to see my father's face, red and mottled with anger. Down on the street below, I could see Susan and a visibly weeping Jessica waiting in an idling taxi. A taxi they must have paid a fortune for to drive them all the way back from the main city airport. "What in the hell did you do?" he roared the second I opened the door. I leaned against the doorframe. A perfect portrait of detached calm. "I cancelled a vacation I was no longer a part of," I said, my voice as even and clear as a bell. "Since I wasn't going, I didn't see why my money should. I simply arranged to get it back." "Your money?" he sputtered, his voice cracking with disbelief. "You sabotaged our trip. We had to pay $300 for a cab. Every hotel in the city is booked solid for some kind of business convention. You had no right to do this." I raised a single eyebrow. Actually, I had every right. It was my name on the resort confirmation, my name on the car rental agreement, my credit card used for every single deposit. You were the one who was very clear about the new terms of the trip. It was for the 3 of you. So now, the three of you get to enjoy a special vacation together, right here at home. I'm not sure why you think that's my problem to solve. I watched the raw fury drain from his face, replaced by the ugly, slack-jawed recognition of his own total powerlessness. He had tried to push me out of the family, and in doing so, had accidentally handed me all the control. He tried to argue, to deploy his usual weapons of guilt and emotional manipulation, talking about Jessica's broken heart and Susan's disappointment, but the words were empty. The deep well of my need for his approval had been poisoned, and it had finally run dry. "You started this, Dad," I said, my voice quiet but unyielding. "You lied to me to get my money. You used my time, my labor, and my hope to build a fantasy you never planned to let me into. You used the idea of family as a weapon against me for years, and then you were shocked when I finally learned how to defend myself. This isn't revenge. This is a consequence." He just stared at me, speechless. He was looking at a complete stranger. The girl who would have done anything for a single crumb of his affection was gone. In her place stood a woman who was finally setting her own terms. Defeated, he turned and stomped back down the stairs to the waiting taxi, a deposed king returning to a miserable kingdom of his own creation. The 2 weeks that were supposed to be their Hawaiian paradise were spent in a thick, resentful silence at their house. I imagined their new vacation clothes sitting in their suitcases, mocking them. When their silence failed to guilt me into an apology, they tried other tactics. Susan sent a long, winding email about how my actions had fractured the family's foundation of trust, and how all she ever wanted was to build a bridge of love between us. I deleted it without replying. Jessica sent a tearful voice message, sobbing about how I had ruined the one special thing she had to look forward to all year. I actually laughed out loud. "Welcome to the real world, princess." About 10 days into their forced staycation, my dad showed up at my door again. He looked smaller somehow. The rage was gone, replaced by a deep, weary exhaustion. "Look," he began, his eyes fixed on his own shoes. "I know you were hurt, and I handled it badly. I can see that now." It was the weakest, most pathetic attempt at an apology I had ever heard. "You think?" I replied, my arms crossed over my chest. "It was just the wrong way to go about it," he mumbled. "But this has gone on long enough. Can't we just move past this? We'll book another trip for next year. I promise. All 4 of us will do it the right way this time." He was trying to reset the board, to put all the pieces back in their original places, still believing that all I ever wanted was another chance to play his twisted game. He didn't understand. By canceling their vacation, I had canceled my subscription to their toxic family dynamic. I gave him a slow, genuine smile. "No, thank you, Dad. I think I'm done with family vacations for a while." I let the words hang in the air for a moment. In fact, I just booked a new trip for myself. For next month, I'm going to Tuscany for 2 weeks. The refund from your Maui trip more than covered the flight, a beautiful little villa in the countryside, and a private cooking class. The look on his face was an exquisite painting of shock and finality. He had come to graciously offer me a path back into his world, only to discover I had already built a new one, a far better one, entirely without him. He had lost. He had lost the money, he had lost the power, and he had finally, irrevocably lost his daughter. He left without another word. They never got their vacation, and I never got a real apology. But I didn't need one anymore. I had reclaimed something far more valuable than $2,000. I had taken back my own dignity. And as I looked at the flight confirmation for my solo trip to Italy, I realized that for the first time in my adult life, I was completely, wonderfully, and unapologetically on my own. And it felt exactly like freedom.